So I think you're an expert, and I'm sure you think you're an expert, but I'd like to know, for the audience's sake, like, what do you think gives you expertise in the field of restaurant tech?
Well, lots of gray hairs that have been well earned. As we were talking about before we hit the record button, there's a lot of miles on my odometer as it relates to deploying restaurant tech. And so I am celebrating 29 years in the restaurant tech business. And prior to that, I was operating restaurants. And so I've been around for a while. And I'm sure some of our listeners out there weren't even alive 29 years ago. When I started back in restaurant tech. And so back to green screen DOS all the way through. And I've seen lots of innovation over the years, work with tens of thousands of restaurants all over the world, deploying different restaurant technology solutions from KDS to loyalty to point of sale to you name it. Just about anything that you can plug into the wall at a restaurant, we've at least touched in one way, shape, or form over the last 30 years.
And so, I think that as owners, as operators, which again, you've been there yourself, we have this delicate relationship with technology. Sometimes it seems useful on its face, and then it's not. It's more of a distraction. And I think that now, today, the culture is like nobody needs one more thing. I'm not trying to plug one more thing into the wall. I'm not trying to download one more thing into my point of sale or give one more tool to my team. What I think people want is I think they want the benefit of those things. And so, software and hardware aside, what are the most exciting benefits that people are getting from technology today?
For me, it's getting better decisions to be able to be made. You've been around the restaurant space a long time ago. Like you'd have to look at people's availability, schedules, sales forecasts, go try and figure out all of those things in your head. Where do I staff somebody at the expo line? Where do I staff somebody in prep? How do I make sure that I'm going to be able to hit my guest experience? How do I make sure that I'm not buying too much filet, but I'm buying enough that I'm not running out on a Friday night? And so big data and being able to capture this data and be able to make real-time decisions in an approachable way where you don't have to be a BI analyst is probably the most exciting thing, because as well as I do, prime costs are the biggest thing that sink restaurants if they're not doing it properly. And so making sure that you have the right product in-house, making sure that you have the right labor in-house to be able to serve the guests that you need, but being able to get that data without having to sit in the office, being able to go to your phone, no different than you look up where's the best Thai food in Chinatown. You can also say, how many people do I need to have on my line on a Friday night nowadays, and be able to get that data back instantly on your phone and make sure that your schedule matches that. So that to me is, I think, the predictive analytics of what it is that you're doing, whether that's on the sales side, the labor side, the food cost side, and all of that, I think is where I've seen the biggest benefit to, people say everybody talks about AI, but at the end of the day, really restaurateurs wanted to make their lives easier. It's hard running restaurants, as we know. And so how can I make it easier? There are technologies that can help them to not have to have, this really deep knowledge of the systems in order to get it.
I was doing my 5-day restaurant profitability masterclass, and at the top of it, what I was talking about was this evolution as an entrepreneur, restaurants aside, and it starts with how. This, how do I learn how to do this, especially in an industry where everything is important, everything is urgent, and you don't have any money to throw at it. So you have to get really good at doing so many different things. And so, then I read Dan Sullivan's book, which was like the next big evolution of my life, Who, Not How.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I began to ask myself, well, instead of how do I do this, like who can do this for me? Who is best in class at this thing? But Jeremy, as it relates to technology, we've now reached this next echelon, which is not how or who, it is like, what can do this for me? Right. And so,
Absolutely. And I think that the more you look into it, but I would tell you, and I agree, I love Dan Sullivan. I could go pull Who Not How off my bookshelf that's sitting right here. I've learned a lot from that guy. And really the E-Myth, I'm sure you've read the E-Myth, but if you
for
haven't read
sure.
the E-Myth, that's another one that's fantastic about kind of that same concept. For me, yes. And understanding what you're trying to solve for, what are those pains that you're trying to get rid of, so that you can find a who or a how to get to to get to that problem. Is your problem scheduling? Is your problem food cost? Is your problem staffing? Is your, just, there's so many different things. To your point, they're a jack of all trades within the restaurant operations. And so, yes, Yes, and I think it also is inclusive of understanding what you're trying to solve for and not trying to boil the ocean and solve everything at the same time would be a recommendation I would make, especially as it comes to technology, because they paint these rosy pictures of everything that it's going to do, but if you don't really understand where you're going, it's hard to get there.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And so I would ask you to triage for me. So let's assume that some of the restaurants listening, they have a very rudimentary tech stack, right? Let's assume that where we are in the mix of things is 25, 30%, probably 40% of the people listening are using Microsoft Excel to do their scheduling, right? They're using basic email. And then they have a point of sale system, which is maybe Toast, maybe Legacy. Who really knows at this point? If you were going to drag someone from where they are now into 2025, making sure that like with each software adjustment they make, they see massive benefit. Where do you start? Where do you begin? Look, where's the lowest hanging fruit, which offers the biggest benefit?
Two areas that I think that I see restaurants fail at often, and that probably the easiest one is third-party delivery integration. To be able to get the menus synced between the two systems and to get the orders directly in. Nothing hurts a guest experience worse than having this tablet dinging in the corner of your. It's very, very inexpensive to get that integrated with your point of sale, even if you've got legacy, to be able to have those things aggregated and have them get printed in the kitchen so they function just like a point of sale order. And so that's a big one that I see dining out all the time is they don't have this integrated third party or first party ordering coming straight through. It's this side, Frankenstein project that they've got these tablets. The second thing is a real time workforce management system, labor management system. There's lots of them out there. We happen to sell Time Forge, but 7 shifts, hot schedules. There's so many of them out there. They're not super expensive, and at the end of the day, they make your life so much easier to be able to control some of that prime cost of labor. So you can get sales data in, regardless of whether it's an Excel output. Almost all of them have integrations to almost every point of sale that's out there. So being able to see what sales are coming in at what time. Those are probably the two areas, to your point. 40% of the people are still using Excel. For $129 a month, they can go take that schedule and have it suggest a schedule to them, have staff members. You're no longer having people that can't change shifts and you don't know who's showing up on a Tuesday night because they change shifts. All of it's digital. You digitize that entire experience, and you now as an owner can control your business versus the business controlling you.
And so let me ask you, so we get the immediate benefits of that. What's level two? Where do you look to next?
I would look to kitchen automation, probably would be one of the big areas that I see. They're still working off of hand tickets. They're still not giving any form of real noticeable. Again, you've been around, like probably had to stamp the ticket or put it on the spindle. But like, how do you know how long it really takes to make the dish that you're making to be able to do that? How do you know that your kitchen staff is working as efficiently as possible? It does it well in the front of the house with the scheduling and knowing that here's sales and sales per labor hour and all of those kind of things. But I think kitchen automation is a really big opportunity. In today's day and age, DoorDash is telling us when we're going to get our food. Amazon's telling us when we're going to get our package. Domino's tells us when we're going to get our pizza. We see that it went into the oven and then it's on its way. Consumers are looking for that type of communication. And without knowing that it got started getting cooked and it got finished getting cooked, it's really hard to deliver that product back to the end consumer. And oftentimes you see people go, oh, if I can't know that, then you know what? I'm going to go somewhere else.
I want to talk about implementation because, I mean, even if we talk as simple as scheduling software, I think that one of the reasons that people are hesitant to do it is it's like, man, now everyone's going to have to download this onto their phones. Then they're going to have to log in and then they're going to have to use it. And then there are going to be all of these questions. There's all of this friction around implementation. The devil, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would ask you, like, you guys implement a ton, big companies that are implementing all of the time across thousands of employees. What are the hacks, the tricks to create that buy-in to make implementation seamless with our teams?
The first thing I would say is resources internally. You've got to resource it. It can't just be somebody's side job. It has to be somebody's project for some period of time to get there. You've got to then figure out who are your water cooler people that are going to move the needle from a cultural perspective and get their buy-in first. Tell them the why. I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek. You start with why. Start with why we're doing this. We know that today's day and age, the 18 to 25-year-old server, cashier, line cook, prep cook is looking to be digital and on these items. They don't want to have to call in and get their schedule every Tuesday when the schedule gets posted. And so from a retention perspective, from an onboarding perspective, they can get that freedom driving for DoorDash, driving for Uber, driving for Amazon. They can get that freedom. And when a restaurant doesn't have that, it often becomes something that they can't even bring people in without it. And so when we talk about implementation, the biggest thing, the biggest thing that I see that people fail at, first and foremost, is they don't have a clear destination of what they're trying to get accomplished. So creating Dan Sullivan tool, if you're not familiar with it, the impact filter, I tell every restaurateur and anybody that's trying to build a project, it's a one-page project plan that says, at the end of this, what's going to be successful. And so if you're not familiar with that, great tool. Love it, because that creates a vision now that you can hand to everybody that says, when we're done with the scheduling tool, this is what your life is going to look like. And then second, that I see people fail is they make it somebody else's job that's already doing purchasing, and now something is going to fall down. They've not taken anything off of them. So either paying the implementer to do it or paying somebody on your staff to say, you know what, for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to take care of purchasing. I want you to go implement this labor scheduling tool or whatever it might be.
And so, as an owner operator myself, I always look through the lens of like, will this save me money or will this make me money? And typically, if it can't do either, I'm not interested. And if it can do both, I'm very interested, Jeremy. But I've evolved, I think, as a lot of people. The one thing I never had any respect for was my own time. And so because I didn't respect my time, I didn't respect the time of my leadership team. I didn't care whether they worked 80 or 85 hours that week, like it was a non-issue. But one of the things that some of these technologies do is they help us save time. Because you can shave 10 hours here, 10 hours there, and not to say that we're going to end up working less as a result, but we are able to spend more focused time working on things that matter most. And so I would ask you, as it relates to the data that we're bringing in and the softwares that we're using, how can we engage with these softwares to save more time?
Again, we talked about AI, and I say it often on my podcast. Technology for technology's sake is worthless, but technology that's truly solving business problems is where it's at. And so, you know what? How long does it take you to write your schedule? 4 hours? Well, you know what? With an automated scheduler from any of those tools that I mentioned, plus another 25 that are out there, you can hit a button and get a suggested schedule that you can now get it in 5 minutes. And now you go save 4 hours a week from building a schedule. It might take you an hour to tweak it to your liking, but in general, because every Friday night, Susie has to serve this VIP that always sits in the corner booth. And so you move Susie to that shift on that Friday night. But otherwise, you can go from 4 hours to 1 hour just putting that in. Going back to the DoorDash, Uber Eats integrated, somebody is sitting there manually having to type those orders into the point of sale so that you can get your sales to reconcile and give your guests back what they're looking for. That time alone is already paid for itself because it's typically $100 to $150 a month for that solution to have it integrated. And so the other thing I tell people, and I think you hear this a lot, is it's an investment. It's not a cost. It's an investment in your business. Are you willing to invest in your business to make it better, to make it meet those consumer demands? And I think as owners, we need to stop looking at what does it cost, and is this investment going to pay off? To your point, is it going to save me time? Is it going to save me money? And I think as we look at it through that filter, we ultimately are going to get better results.
AI is a super sexy thing right now. Like it's like the thing that everybody's talking about, and everybody's got it baked into their software to a greater or lesser degree, even if it's impossible to see because it's not actually built yet. It's just on the website. And I would ask you, like, what are the most exciting ways that you are seeing AI used in technology today that restaurants can harness?
The day that they can deploy today, it's really that analytics and the capability to get data out using natural language. Hey, what was my busiest Tuesday in the last 6 months? You would have to go through 25, different reports and run it for every Tuesday to figure out what was my busiest Tuesday for the last 6 months right now. With AI, the ability to go filter through that reporting, and quite frankly, it doesn't even have to be something that your point of sale company. It could be your DSR that you upload to ChatGPT every day, and you pay $20 a month for ChatGPT. It could be, that old Aloha Micros PosiTouch report that you exported to send to your accountant that could also get pushed into your AI bot to be able to ask those questions. And so for me, AI that is helping you to run your business. What was my busiest Tuesday? What was my top selling item? How many of these did I sell? Those things take a lot of time and a lot of energy to think through and to have to build. And I think even just some of the open source stuff that's free on the web can get you there today without a ton of effort.
Let's talk about point of sale. Not proud to say it, but I was a legacy man myself. I mean, you spend 25, 30, $35,000 installing this point of sale system. And it's hard to throw it in the trash, especially when like it works
Mhm.
still kind of. It might not have all the bells and the whistles that everything else does. But I have clients come to me all the time and they say, I'm on legacy. Should I move to toast? Should I move to shift four? Should I make the upgrade? And it's hard for me, as an insider, but also an outsider, to calculate the ROI of changing out your entire internal infrastructure, especially when a bunch of that stuff might not transfer over. I'm sure that you recommend to many people that they do, and I'm sure you recommend to many people that they don't based on specific use case. But what is the criterion that you use to evaluate whether now is the time to actually upgrade your point of sale?
So the big thing that I find is that if you're in a significant cycle, and with any of those cycles, I've got to go refresh my Aloha hardware. I'm going to spend a whole bunch of money anyway. I might as well at least look. I'm changing leadership. I'm changing business models. Business models, I'm going from full service to fast casual. I'm starting this fast casual. Like those are the areas that it's the easiest to make that decision. I've got to do a wholesale upgrade, or my point of sale company just got bought. And now I have to, I no longer have support. And so those are the areas that we find. I mean, again, Shift4 has been buying up point of sale companies, Rebel, PosiTouch, Focus, Future POS, you name it. They bought a whole bunch of different products out there. And years before that, Heartland Restaurants got bought by Global. And with that, they get stuck. They can't get the support they need. They can't fulfill their business needs. But I agree with you. There are certain cases. I was just talking to a guy that's based in LA, runs a chain of about 10 restaurants at RLC 2 weeks ago. And he's like, dude, this is not the biggest of my problems right now. Yes, I have a legacy system. Yes, I know I'm going to need to change it at some point. But you know what? It's working. And if I'm going to invest money, I'm going to invest money in growing sales. I'm going to invest money in, cutting my labor cost. Everything is so uncertain right now. I'm not changing. It's like, you know what? I respect that. I respect that because you know what? You're very clear that says this is not going to move the needle enough for me. The last piece I would tell you, and I think I've said this on quite a few podcasts recently, is a lot of the legacy systems that have now gotten bought or just are out there, they have built a locked in system where they can continue to change your pricing and change your ability to make money in a way that's almost untenable. And so if they're continuing to increase costs week over week, month over month, greater than that of what you can grow sales or grow profitability, you need to consider it. Perfect example, I was on the phone with somebody recently, and their cost of their point of sale SaaS fees went up almost double. Well, that just literally blew up their entire P&L because now instead of spending $500 a month, they're spending $1,000 a month. Well, that's a car payment for the owner. So now you've got to consider, can I find something else out there that's going to be able to keep me in that same ring? So really, I find it's in three areas. It's that I need to do a refresh anyway. I'm changing business models, or I'm getting so untenable with my existing vendor that I need to do something different.
I want to talk about marketing because this was a conversation I was literally having today. I believe that the future of restaurants, restaurant ownership, restaurant operations is going to be that it's not that this tech is going to overwhelm what we do and it's going to remove hospitality. It's just that restaurant owners that refuse to move into the future as it relates to technology will be replaced by those that do. And the biggest area that I see as a professional marketer myself is marketing software. It is how do we most efficiently capture data? And then how do we reach out to people through the mediums and the methods that most resonate with them? As it relates to loyalty, what are the most exciting things that you're seeing? What are the features that people are enjoying the most? And data collection as well. If you're going to ask someone for their name, their phone number, their email address, and their birthday, which I strongly recommend everyone listening to, what is the path of least resistance to collect that data?
Well, let me take a step back, Josh, and just say for me, the biggest, I guess, panacea of this loyalty is frictionless loyalty. Figuring out some way to tie the transaction to the person. And obviously, in an online commerce, everybody's had, pizza has been 90%. I give you your name, I give you my address, I give you my phone number. And so that's the panacea of where everybody in offline commerce is trying to get to. And so we're seeing more and more people tying the point of sale data to the credit card data to the person, and they figure out ways to do those so that Josh doesn't have to walk up. I've heard real life stories of women having to type in their phone number on the pin pad or say it to a cashier, and people texting them from the dining room later trying to hit on them, like creepy stuff. Then I'm like, dude, that's weird, but it happens every day. And so I think it's this idea that says, you know who I am, and then being able to help give you a customized experience, whether I'm interacting with your brand online, offline, third-party delivery. And so I think more and more, whether it's the beacons that are in our pockets called an iPhone and an Android phone, or it's some form of way that it knows the hash on my Apple Pay or my credit card, that is really the way that that everything is going. I would agree with you. Knowing who your guests are, especially in today's day and age, we're recording this in mid 2025. Like, things are going to get harder. It feels, and everybody at RLC a couple of weeks ago was like, dude, things are going to get rough. Traffic is down. So knowing who your loyal guests are and being able to communicate with them and figure out reasons to get them to come back is critical. Also, knowing who those consumers are, going back to your comment about AI, being able to create personalized messages to them, no different than I log into my wife's Amazon. It looks very different than my Amazon because what she buys is very different than mine. I log into her Facebook or her Instagram, very different than what mine looks like. And I think more and more consumers are expecting, when I walk in, I don't drink. So don't, market to me that, I need beer or I need to try the wine club, because you know what? I'm not a drinker. And so for me, that is not relevant to me. And so it turns it off. And I think way too many marketers nowadays just blast messages out hoping to have people come in. And I think we have the capability to not have to do that with the data that we have in our systems. And again, back to the frictionless part, I think it's getting there if it's not already there for many people.
I have the good fortune of having Sean Walchef as a friend, and I was on his show recently, and he asked at the end of the show, he was like, "So, what's your favorite tech stack?" And I don't really have one. I think that I'm running a very simplistic business relative to most. For me, it's my tech stack is built around collecting data and authentic communication going out. But I also think that that works really well for me, and it works really well for a lot of people. I meet, clients that start with 15, 20, 25 different softwares that are all kind of sort of talking to each other. At what point do you need to clean house? And like, how do you inventory your tech stack to make sure, number one, that you're not paying for redundant technology, and number two, that you're monetizing what you're using?
So, two things that I recommend to restaurant owners is that they have a true partnership with their tech providers so that they understand where their business is going, and they're asking those questions that says what works best. Because you know what? There is no one size fits all. There is no one size tech stack. And Sean and I happen to also be friends. And the reason that I have the show that I have is partially because he encouraged me to start the podcast years ago. And I'm sure he did to you too. He's like, dude, you got to be a media company. And so I love Sean for that. And at the same time, at the end of the day, the solution needs to be worth it. I would tell you that once a quarter, you need to be looking through your P&L and figuring out what you're paying for and deciding, is this something you still need? Is it something you're still utilizing? Most of the time, the tech tools do what they say they're going to do if implemented properly. But if you're not using them, none of it matters. And so I would encourage all of the listeners out there to start to look at those things and say, what are those things? Marquee is a fantastic product, but if you're not using it, what difference does it make? It could be there collecting data all day long. And again, I just threw Marquee out because I know he partners with Sean in that regard. But if you're not using the data to drive customer behavior, if you're not using guest feedback from an ovation or something like that, if you're not going to react to it, then shut it off. Because you know what? One of the things, and I know you know this, for every dollar that I save in my business is $5 to $7 I don't have to make on the top line. And so you know what? If you're going to save $100, on those things, and then last thing on the partnership side is I think you call your partners and say, hey guys, I'm not getting the value out of this. Can you help me figure out what I'm doing wrong? Because you know that you bought it for some reason. If you're not at a place where you're like, you know what, I'm done, call them and say, you know what, do you have some free training that I can take? Do you have some ways that I should be able to implement this to make my business better? And true partners are going to deliver that to you because they want you to stay on their tool so that they can continue to garner the value, and so can you.
You bring up an interesting point, which was the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, which was I interviewed Jordan from Seven Shifts. Seven Shifts, like all of the other softwares you mentioned, it can do so much. But that doesn't really matter if you're not going to do it all, if you're not going to use it all. And so I have always been stingy, very, very stingy. And like, I'm going to squeeze the last little bit out of this thing that I'm paying for that I can. But I know that that's not true for a lot of people. Let's talk about underutilization of software and how you triage to make sure that you are getting everything that you're paying for. How do you do that without creating more work or more overwhelm for yourself? What's your approach?
I think it comes back to that, early on, what is your intended and stated goal for this solution? I'm going to go implement Seven Shifts. What is my desired end result? When I paint a picture of what it looks like at the end, and I would encourage people to stay on point, because you can't eat an elephant all at one time. You got to eat it one bite at a time. And so starting with scheduling, and then starting with predictive scheduling, and then starting with, and you just kind of keep working your way up. But I also think back to an earlier point that I made, Josh, is resourcing it, having somebody that's a champion inside of your business. It can't always just be the owner. You, back to who not how, you've got to have somebody that's your champion on those products. If it's KDS, who's your champion on KDS to make KDS do what you need it to do? Who's your champion on scheduling? Who's your champion on food costing? Who's your champion on point of sale? It can't always just come back to the owner. You've got to figure out somebody in your team, but that's also great leadership growth for them to take on this project. I just finished sitting on the shelf behind me, Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Gadara. He talks about the fact that, are they really ready? No, they're not. His guy that was in charge of his beer program, he didn't have a beer program, but he said, you know what? I'm going to put this guy in charge of the beer program before he's ready and see where he goes, and then coach him along as he gets up there. And I think in all of our tech stacks, finding somebody that can be a champion that's passionate about this, that wants to learn it, it becomes part of what they do. And I see great growth in there. And you know what? You're paying them oftentimes, it's a pre-shift thing. It's 2 hours pre-shift. And you know what? They might go play with this tool or whatever else. So you're paying a couple, 20, 30, 40 bucks to have them do that. But you're going to get outsized results versus it sitting on your to-do list. And it goes along with dealing with the plumber and dealing with the landlord and dealing with the food cost guy and everything else.
What's the mathematical equation to tie all this to dollars? If we go back to what I had said originally, that, I'm only going to do it if it makes me more money or it saves me more money. How do you practically do the mathematical calculation, section by section of that tech stack to make sure that you're maximizing ROI?
So to me, it's got to deliver at least twice as much value as it costs. So if it's $129, it's got to at least deliver you, $250 at least. And I think it could be significantly more than that. And a lot of times it is. But I think for me, I always look at it and say, how can it really deliver me 5x what I'm paying for it on a monthly basis? And that is inclusive of the investment. And so to me, I always look at it and say it's a 12 to 18 month investment to get myself into this. If I can pay for it back in 12 to 18 months, that's the right investment strategy. And then as far as it's costing me $200, I need it to make me $400 to $1,000 a month more in top line revenue, or save me $400 to $1,000 in cost, and it's worth it. So that's typically how I look at things, and I would recommend people look at it when they're evaluating.
You go to the shows, but then you also have these really close working relationships with a bunch of the tech entrepreneurs out there. What are you most excited about? What are they most excited about? What do we have to look forward to in the next 6 months to 5 years?
Wow, that's a big range. I think in the next 6 months, you're going to see two things that I think are going to change the way fundamentally we do things. I do think the technology is getting to the kitchen, whether that's robotics or it's double-sided grills to ensure that a burger gets cooked perfectly every time. And I could go through the lots of different pieces of tech that are in making sure the oil frying liquid is perfectly clean, to getting my refrigeration and all of that stuff. Technology has come to the back of the house more so than just a KDS anymore. There's so many things. I just watched a video yesterday from somebody that's got a full robot full robotic pizza joint, and another person that's doing a full robotic Wingstop-esque product where wings and fries are made by a complete robot. And so I think that's coming. I think that the span and where it goes will depend on the service type. The big thing that I'm probably most excited about, Josh, is that I think the kitchen computer vision stuff is getting so good that it can do what you might have done on the expo line to ensure that product is perfectly plated the way that you want it through a camera. You're going to set a vision for what the pepperoni pizza needs to look like, for what the ribeye steak needs to look like, for what the chicken piccata needs to look like going out of the dining room. And it's going to get smart enough to be able to even use things like what came into the kitchen. Did they have a wheat allergy? So I make sure that the gluten-free pasta's on this dish. I think it's going to get there to where the idea of ensuring that the product that gets into the bag or onto the plate is the product that the customer was offered, and it's perfectly to spec through machine learning and computer vision to ensure that that's done.
But there's still this concern, right? This Amazonian style. Well, okay, so we're in the hospitality industry, but now we all work for robots because you see it on the news, right? Like that Amazon gives you your stuff. I mean, if you're in a major city, like Prime isn't even 2 days anymore. Now it's like same day or one day. But it's because there are all of these humans that work for all of these robots in these factories with no air conditioning, and they're just forced to sprint, right? From row to row to row to create all of this robotic efficiency, but using the body of a human to get it done. Is that where we're headed? Are we headed into more of a manufacturing style business? How do you weigh the two?
So I heard an operator say this to me a couple weeks ago at the multi-unit restaurant show in Las Vegas. Multi-unit restaurant technology show is it allows them to be hospitable. They're no longer. I mean, if you think about somebody working at a drive-through, and I know you're primarily fine dining, but if you're working in a drive-through, you've got a headset, you've got a point of sale, you've got to pick, you've got to pull, you've got to do all of these different things. There is 8 to 9 different jobs. I had somebody on my show recently that does beverage, non-alcoholic beverage drink mixing. 78% of Starbucks cold drinks are modified. Somebody has to think in their head about how many ounces in a large drink of almond milk I need to have versus cow's milk versus soy milk, because every one of the viscosities and ratios are different. Robotics doing that work consistently every time so that I can look the guest in the eye and say, thank you for your order. And is there anything else I can get for you? I think it creates space for the things that are mundane so that I can truly be hospitable rather than taking the jobs away. I think different than manufacturing and different than Amazon is we're in a people to people business. The people are coming into our establishments. They're working with us face to face. And if I am constantly looking down at my screen or at my phone or my tablet and not looking the guest in the eye, this is going to free up some of that time so that I can look the guest in the eye and ensure that I know that their kid just spilled a glass of milk on the table and I need to go get something to wipe it up. So I think that's where it's going. And I think they're going to take away these autonomous tasks that don't necessarily need to be there so that they do have time to plate the food properly. The burger is getting cooked, but now it can get assembled properly so that it looks perfect when it goes out the door, rather than me having to worry about what's on the grill. Is my timing right for these things? Because it's hard. I mean, you've worked in a lot of kitchens. It's hard. There's 75 things going on. And if you screw it up, if you're super high dollar, you got to throw the stuff away and make it again. And now you're suffering in guest experience. If I let the fries sit in the fryer for 2 minutes too long versus automatically them getting pulled, so I'm not having to worry about that while I'm also worrying about the grill, I think it's going to make a better, more consistent product that meets the spec so that I can be hospitable and have human interaction with the guest and with each other in the back of the house.
How can the restaurant owners and operators that are listening plug themselves into this ecosystem? How do you learn? And what are the educational resources that they have at their disposal to learn more about restaurant tech, what is now and what is next?
So Shameless plug. I host a podcast called the Restaurant Technology Guys, so you can listen to the show that I host. I get some of these people with the kitchen AI stuff and machine learning and I mean, Jordan's been on the show. Sean's been on the show. Lots of these different people have been on the show to talk about where things are going. So restauranttechnologyguys.com, weekly podcast comes out, talk about all of these things. Where do I learn? There's two places that I learn. I go out and visit clients and ask them, what's your biggest pain point? And then I go to different shows. So on my show schedule, I always go to the National Retail Show in New York. It's very, very large, similar to the Chicago show in May, in January, because retail has bigger budgets. They're typically, Walmart, Amazon, Target, and they're out there on the forefront looking at big data and automation and computers and robotics and all of these things. And so it's like, if it's hitting there, it's likely going to hit our industry. I always go to the multi-unit restaurant tech show in Las Vegas. If you are a multi-unit operator, good show to go to. Chicago is fantastic in May. That show's coming up in a couple of weeks. Huge. Get some, comfortable shoes and have a plan. I wrote this last year to a few people. It's like, have a plan, go figure out what are you looking for? Because if you just go wander around, you could be there for, 4 days and not ever see anything. So make sure that you know what you're looking for. And then there's a tech show called Food Service Technology it typically is in Dallas. This year it's in Orlando, and it's typically in the fall, in the October timeframe, that I would encourage people to at least check out, because again, all of these things are oftentimes on display. They're getting talked about. The last thing is I subscribe to probably 15 to 20 newsletters. Do I read every one of them every day? No. I actually use AI to summarize them and pick out the key points to make sure that I do those. So I just take and put in the URL, say, summarize this article for me, and it gives it to me in a 2-minute read. And then if I want to learn more, I'll dig in a little bit deeper. And so for me, I subscribe to all, Nation's Restaurant News and Full Service Magazine and QSR Magazine and Fast Casual Magazine, all of these different publications to figure out what are people doing. What is Wingstop doing? Wingstop might not be, your target demographic, but you know what they're doing often drives things. Wendy's got blasted last year for surge pricing, what got dubbed as surge pricing in the New York Times. And again, it wasn't really, it was dynamic pricing, which we've always done with happy hour and things like that, but they called it surge pricing when they wrote the article, and they just got blasted. And so oftentimes I just like to hear what some of these big brands are doing to figure out where are they going. One last resource that I do is if there's somebody that's exactly like your space or somebody that you see as a large competitor and they're public, read their 10K. What is their CFO saying in their 10K? What is their CEO saying in their 10K about technology? Because oftentimes they're going to predict the future that says we are going and doing X, Y, and Z. And you've got to know that that's out there so that you're, and Dan Sullivan, great, your ears will only hear and your eyes will only see what your brain is looking for. And so if you know that you're looking for kitchen AI, you'll start to hear it out there. No different than when you're shopping for a Toyota truck. Every other car happens to be a Toyota truck. Same idea.